My phone kept vibrating on the passenger seat like it was angry at me. I was parked behind a closed gas station off Route 17, the kind with flickering lights that never get fixed. A cold Starbucks cup sat in the holder, untouched, ice melted into a weak brown puddle. I hadn't noticed I was crying until a tear dropped onto the steering wheel and spread into the cracks. The voicemail timer on my screen blinked back at me. 37 seconds. I didn't press play. I just stared at it and thought about the farm again, the one we hid in, the one place that almost made us feel safe. I live in a small town in upstate New York now, the kind people pass through without stopping. There's a Dollar General, a diner that closes at 3, and a bus stop that smells like old rain. I rent a basement studio behind a family's house. The ceiling is low enough that I can touch it if I stretch. At night, I hear footsteps above me and the hum of the dishwasher. It's not loud, but it reminds me I'm always under someone else's life. I work mornings at a warehouse packing returns. Most of the boxes are half open, taped back together by someone who gave up. I know the feeling. My cousin Ray used to joke that returns were just things that couldn't fit where they landed. He had a way of making anything sound lighter, even when it wasn't. Ray and I grew up close like siblings. When our parents ran out of patience and money, the state stepped in with forms and meetings and polite voices. The Reformatory wasn't what people imagine from TV. No bars, no shouting guards. Just schedules, locked doors, and the slow grind of being watched all the time. You learn to sit straight. You learn to answer questions without saying much. You learn that quiet is safer. We didn't plan to escape in some big way. It happened because of a broken latch on a side door and a staff change that left a hallway empty for 3 minutes. We walked fast, hearts pounding, hands shaking, trying not to run. Running would have made it real. Walking made it feel like a mistake we could still undo. But we didn't turn back. The farm was Ray's idea. It was his grandfather's place, abandoned after a foreclosure. The house had no power and the windows were boarded up, but the barn still stood. We cleared a corner, dragged in old blankets, and made a shelter that felt like a secret only we knew. During the day, we stayed quiet. At night, we whispered plans like they were promises. We talked about jobs, about apartments, about a future that didn't have check-ins or clipboards. That was years ago. The memory follows me anyway. It shows up when my alarm goes off at 5. It shows up when my manager tells me to move faster. It shows up when I see 2 kids laughing too loud on the bus and feel something tighten in my chest. Money is always tight. I count bills on Sundays and pretend the numbers will change if I look away. I tell myself I don't need much. I tell myself I'm fine. But there's a weight that sits on me, heavy and familiar. It's the feeling of being almost okay and knowing it could tip the other way with one bad week. Ray doesn't live nearby anymore. He moved west for construction work. We text sometimes. Short messages. Jokes that don't land the same. There's a gap between us that I don't know how to cross. We never talk about the Reformatory or the farm. It's like a box we agreed to leave unopened. Still, it hums in the background of everything I do. After work, I stop at the diner and sit at the counter. I order coffee and toast because it's cheap. The waitress knows my face but not my name. That feels about right. I watch people come in with coworkers, with families, with plans. I check my phone and see nothing new. The silence feels loud. At night, I scroll through listings for places I can't afford and jobs that want more experience than I have. I tell myself tomorrow I'll do better. Tomorrow I'll call Ray. Tomorrow I'll listen to that voicemail. But tomorrow keeps slipping. The truth is, I don't know who I am without the rules I grew up under. Freedom sounded simple when we hid in that barn. It felt like fresh air. Now it feels like standing in a wide field with no signs. I'm tired of pretending I know where to go. The voicemail stays unread. 37 seconds. It could be nothing. It could be everything. I finish my coffee, leave a small tip, and step back into the cold. The town looks the same as always. Quiet. Waiting. So am I. I finally listened to the voicemail 2 days later, not because I felt brave, but because my phone battery was dying and I knew I'd lose it if it shut off. I was sitting at the bus stop after work, hands numb, watching traffic crawl past like it didn't care about anyone waiting. The bench was cold through my jacket. I pressed play and held the phone close, like it might run away. It wasn't Ray. It was a woman from the county records office. She spoke in a calm, practiced voice, the kind that sounds the same whether she's leaving good news or bad. She said my name carefully, then said the words, property inquiry, and abandoned agricultural land. She mentioned the old farm. She said my name again, slower this time, and asked me to call back. I stared at the screen after it ended. The bus roared past without stopping. I didn't move. My first thought was that they'd finally connected the dots, that someone had remembered we'd been there. Even after all these years, my body reacted before my mind caught up. My shoulders tensed. My jaw locked. I looked around like I was being watched. A man sat down at the far end of the bench. He smelled like cigarettes and laundry soap. He nodded once, not friendly, not unfriendly, just human. I shifted my bag onto my lap and kept staring at my phone. Cold today, he said after a while. Yeah, I said. My voice sounded thin to me. We sat in silence again. I thought about getting up and walking home, but my legs felt heavy. The woman's voice replayed in my head. Property inquiry. Abandoned land. My kid used to hate the cold, the man said, like he was picking up a thought he'd dropped earlier. Said it made everything feel harder than it needed to be. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure why he was telling me this. But something about the way he said it, casual and tired, made it feel okay to listen. She moved south, he went on. Calls me once a week. Says she's fine. I believe her most days. I nodded, even though he wasn't looking at me. That's good, I said. It felt strange, talking to a stranger about family. It also felt easier than talking to people who knew my whole story. He shrugged. You learn not to push. People stay when they're ready. The bus finally pulled up. We stood and boarded, sat a few rows apart. I kept thinking about what he'd said. People stay when they're ready. It stuck to me in a way I didn't expect. That night, I called the number from the voicemail. I almost hung up when it rang. But then someone answered. The woman introduced herself again. She said the county was reviewing abandoned properties for possible sale or cleanup. The farm had come up. My name was still attached to it through old records tied to my great-grandfather. She said they needed to know if I had any interest or information. I don't own it, I said quickly. I never did. We understand, she said. We're just trying to close gaps. Gaps. Another word that felt too close. After I hung up, I sat on my mattress in the dark. The basement smelled damp. A pipe knocked somewhere above me. I thought about the farm, the way the barn creaked when the wind picked up, the dust floating in the beam of Ray's flashlight. I thought about how safe it felt, even though it wasn't. I didn't tell Ray about the call right away. Part of me didn't want to open that door. Another part of me felt like I owed him honesty. I typed a message, deleted it, typed again. County called. About the farm. He replied an hour later. Wow. That place still exists. Yeah. Long pause. Then. You okay? That question landed heavier than I expected. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. I realized no one had asked me that in a long time in a way that felt real. I don't know, I typed. Then erased it. I'm fine, I typed instead. A lie so small it almost felt true. Over the next few days, the farm crept back into my thoughts. Not as a hiding place, but as something unfinished. I caught myself scrolling through maps on my phone, zooming in on roads I recognized. I told myself it was just curiosity. At work, I messed up a packing slip and had to redo a whole pallet. My manager sighed but didn't yell. That made it worse. On my lunch break, I sat outside on an overturned crate and ate a sandwich I barely tasted. I kept thinking about gaps. About things left open. On Friday evening, my neighbor upstairs knocked on my door. She's an older woman with careful hair and soft sweaters. She held out a small container. "Made too much soup," she said. "Figured you might want some." I took it, surprised by how much that simple gesture meant. "Thank you," I said. My throat tightened. I hoped she didn't notice. She smiled. "It's cold out. We've got to look out for each other." After she left, I ate the soup slowly. It was warm and plain and grounding. I realized how long it had been since someone had done something kind for me without expecting anything back. That night, I called Ray. We didn't talk about the Reformatory. We didn't talk about running. We talked about work, about weather, about nothing. But before we hung up, he said, "You ever think about going back there? Just to see it?" I hesitated. "Sometimes." "Me too," he said. "Doesn't mean we're stuck. Just means it mattered." I lay awake after the call, staring at the ceiling inches from my face. The farm wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a solution. But maybe it was a thread I'd never tied off. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel completely closed. Just cautious. Just human. Like something small had shifted, not enough to change everything, but enough to notice. I took a day off work the following week. I told my manager I wasn't feeling well, which was true in a way that didn't show up on a thermometer. I drove north early, before the sun fully came up, with the radio low and my phone face down on the seat. The roads emptied out the farther I went. Strip malls turned into fields. Billboards gave way to bare trees and long fences. I hadn't planned to go all the way to the farm. I told myself I was just driving, just thinking. But my hands knew the turns before my brain admitted it. Muscle memory is like that. It doesn't ask permission. When I pulled onto the dirt road, my chest tightened. The car bounced over ruts I remembered too well. The barn came into view slowly, its roof sagging more than it used to, one side darker where boards had fallen away. The house looked smaller than it did in my memory. Everything did. I parked and sat there with the engine running. My phone buzzed. A text from Ray. "You there?" I didn't answer. I turned the car off and listened to the quiet settle. No voices. No schedules. Just wind moving through dead grass. Walking up to the barn felt like stepping into a version of myself I'd tried to outgrow. The door hung crooked. I pushed it open and dust rose into the air. The smell hit me first. Old wood. Rust. Something faintly sweet and rotten. My eyes adjusted slowly. The corner where we'd built the shelter was still there. The boards we'd leaned together had collapsed, but I could see where they'd been. The floor was littered with leaves and mouse droppings. A piece of rope lay coiled where Ray used to hang his backpack. I crouched down and felt my breath go shallow. This place had held so much of us. Our fear. Our hope. Our stubborn belief that if we stayed hidden long enough, life would figure itself out for us. It hadn't. I sat on an overturned crate and pressed my palms into my knees. Memories came in waves. Nights whispering plans we didn't know how to make real. Days lying still, counting cracks in the wood, jumping at every sound. The feeling of being free and trapped at the same time. I realized then what I'd been avoiding. We didn't escape the Reformatory and move on. We escaped and froze. Ray had found ways to move eventually, but I'd stayed in that crouched position, waiting for someone else to tell me what came next. My phone buzzed again. This time, I answered. "I'm here," I said. Ray exhaled on the other end. "Yeah, I figured." We didn't say anything for a moment. The silence felt heavier than it used to, weighted with years. "It's worse," he said finally. "Or better." I don't know. Both, I said. He laughed softly. You remember how we thought we'd live here forever? Yeah, I said. Like it was enough. It was, he said. For then. That's when it hit me. We'd done what we could with what we had. The problem wasn't that it wasn't enough. The problem was that I'd never let myself update the plan. I don't know how to do this, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Normal life. Decisions. I keep waiting for someone to check my work. Ray was quiet. When he spoke, his voice was steadier than mine. No one's coming, he said. That's the hard part. And the good part. I closed my eyes. A tight pressure built behind them, not sharp enough to cry, just heavy. What if I mess it up? You will, he said. I have. Plenty. Doesn't mean it ends. After we hung up, I stayed in the barn longer than I meant to. I walked around, touched the walls, let the memories come without pushing them away. I wasn't trying to relive them. I was trying to understand them. On the drive back, I pulled over once, suddenly overwhelmed by the urge to turn around, to stay close to the past where at least I knew the rules. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and let the feeling wash through me. Not panic. Grief. Grief for the kid I was. For the safety I thought hiding would give me. For the years I spent half-waiting. That night, back in my basement, I didn't distract myself with my phone. I sat at the small table and wrote things down on a scrap of paper. Not goals. Just truths. I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to choose. I don't have to be ready to start. The words looked plain and almost embarrassing. But they stayed. The next morning, I called the county office back. I asked what the process looked like. What my options were. The woman explained it slowly, professionally. There was no pressure. Just information. After I hung up, I felt exposed. Like I'd stepped into the light without knowing if I belonged there. But underneath that was something else. Relief. At work, I asked my manager about moving to a different shift. Not a promotion. Just a change. He looked surprised, then thoughtful. We can try, he said. That night, I texted Ray. I think I'm done hiding. He replied almost instantly. Me too. Took me a while. Lying in bed, listening to the house settle above me, I understood something I'd been circling for years. The hardest part wasn't surviving what happened. It was letting myself believe I wasn't defined by it anymore. It scared me. It still does. But the fear felt different now. Less like a wall. More like a door I hadn't opened yet. The changes didn't come all at once. That would have felt fake. They came the way real life usually does, in small adjustments that barely register until you look back and realize something shifted. My new shift at the warehouse started a week later. Afternoons instead of mornings. It meant sleeping in a little and getting home later, but it also meant the building felt less crowded, less loud. Fewer eyes. Fewer supervisors walking by with clipboards. I worked at a steadier pace. I made fewer mistakes. No one clapped for that, but no one sighed either. I started to feel like I belonged there, not forever, but for now. I called the county office again and asked to meet in person. The building was plain, all beige walls and framed maps. The woman from the voicemail sat across from me with a folder and a calm expression. She explained the process again. The farm would likely be sold. There were options if I wanted to be involved, but no obligations. I just wanted to see it, I said. Before anything happens. She nodded like that made sense. That's common, she said. Places hold weight. Walking out of that office, I felt lighter than I expected. I hadn't fixed anything. I hadn't saved the farm. But I'd faced it. That counted. Ray and I started talking more regularly after that. Not every day. Not deep talks every time. Just checking in. Sharing dumb stories from work. complaining about weather. Once, he sent me a photo of a half-finished deck he was working on. His hands looked rough. Capable. Looks good, I texted. Still learning, he replied. That felt right. At home, the basement didn't feel as cramped anymore. Or maybe I just noticed it less. I rearranged the furniture so the table sat closer to the small window. I bought a cheap lamp from a thrift store and replaced the flickering bulb. One night, I cooked pasta instead of eating toast. It wasn't impressive. It was enough. I started stopping at the diner less. Not because it was bad, but because I didn't need it the same way. Sometimes I cooked. Sometimes I ate standing up in the kitchen. I still drank too much coffee. Some habits stick. The older woman upstairs kept leaving small containers of food by my door. I started returning them washed, sometimes with a note that just said thanks. One evening, we ran into each other outside. "You settling in?" she asked. "I think so," I said. And I meant it. A month after I went back to the farm, I got a message from the county. The property was officially moving forward. Demolition was possible. Sale likely. I read the email twice, then closed my phone and sat with it. I thought I'd feel sadder. And I did, a little. But mostly, I felt calm. The farm had done its job. It didn't need to stay standing for that to be true. That night, I called Ray. "They're probably tearing it down," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "Figures." "I'm okay," I added, surprised to hear it out loud. "Me too," he said. "I think we already took what we needed." After the call, I went for a walk. The streetlights buzzed softly. A couple walked past me, arguing in low voices about groceries. Somewhere, a TV laughed too loud. Normal sounds. Normal lives. I realized then that I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for permission. Not for rescue. Not for the right feeling to arrive before I acted. I was doing things scared. Doing things imperfectly. And the world hadn't ended. A few weeks later, I applied for a training program at the warehouse. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't promise a new life. It just offered skills. Structure I chose this time. When I hit submit, my heart raced like it used to when doors locked behind me. But this time, I didn't freeze. I didn't know if I'd get in. That wasn't the point. The point was I'd finally stopped hiding in places that once kept me alive but no longer let me grow. On my way home, my phone buzzed. A message from Ray. "Proud of you." I stood on the sidewalk longer than necessary, reading it again. The pride didn't feel like pressure. It felt like recognition. That night, lying in bed, listening to the familiar sounds above me, I thought about the kid I was in that barn, whispering plans into the dark. I wished I could tell them something simple. You survive. You don't stay stuck. You learn to choose. Life didn't suddenly make sense. I still worried about money. I still felt lonely some days. But there was a quiet confidence underneath it now. A belief that I was allowed to build something in the open. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. Light filtered through the small window. Dust floated in it, slow and ordinary. I sat up, stretched, and felt steady. Not healed. Not finished. Just moving forward. And for the first time, that felt like enough.